Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Digital Skills Acceleration series from Tech Target. My name is John Panker. I'll be your moderator as we walk you through some 101s on digital demand generation. Let me talk to you a little bit about what we're going to be covering over the course of the next 15 minutes or so. We're going to pose a series of FAQs to an industry expert. Again, our goal today is to help you have a better handle on digital demand generation. We're going to arm you with some questions as well so that when you talk to potential providers out there, you're able to evaluate them effectively. We're going to keep it pretty quick today, again, about 15 minutes in length, and you will get a little bit of perspective on Tech Target and our offerings throughout the course of our discussion. So let me tell you about our featured speaker today, our expert. It's Byrony Seifert. She's got 15 years experience in B2B technology marketing. She's responsible here at Tech Target for all of our product delivery, specifically lead generation outside of the US. And Byrony has a wealth of experience, having previously served in senior product marketing, customer success, and product management roles. So Byrony, great to have you here.
Thank you, John.
Let's get going with the first question in our FAQ. Pretty easy one, but I understand that definitions of leads can vary. So tell us, what is the definition of a lead?
Yeah, so I'm going to start from a little bit of basics because hopefully we have some people who don't even know what a lead is watching this and learning. So a lead can be a variety of things. The basic definition of a lead is actually an engagement with a content asset. They have downloaded and proactively engaged with a content asset. We call this content syndication. So you have content such as white papers, blogs, webcasts, videos, anything that can be engaged with that talks about your offering or the topic or what's happening in the marketplace right now that can help a user with their research process. So that's a typical understanding of a lead in content syndication. There can be other definitions of this as well. There can be things called MQLs, or marketing qualified leads, or SQLs, or sales qualified leads as they're called. These definitions vary depending on company, gets into a lot of things related to scoring and follow-up from sales. But really today's conversation, we're going to talk about a content syndication leads, or something we actually call demand generation. These actual leads, just to clarify, usually come from an opted-in engagement. So in today's online marketing landscape, they actually have to be opted in to give permission to use their data after they've engaged with the content at hand. In addition, usually in content syndication campaigns, which we'll talk about today, there are demographic and firmographic filters that come with that information set. So in typical content syndication, when you're asking a publisher for what we call a lead guarantee, or a number of leads downloaded of your content, it's usually something you talk about as well in the filtering.
Okay, so let's come back to that filtering conversation in just a second. But my second question for you is around the difference between a content syndication lead, which you just defined for us, and a BANT lead. Help us differentiate between the two.
So it's actually a conversation that comes up a lot because, again, BANT can be defined in many different ways. But a typical BANT lead versus a content syndication lead actually has to do mostly with a project confirmation from the user. And that project confirmation normally is in the next 12 months. Now, this gets into a huge difference between actually how these are generated. So content syndication leads usually is the posting of content online for the purpose of engagement. And that means that people can engage with it organically or via email marketing or even through telemarketing in some cases. Calling for leads is a practice a lot of publishers actually still do to this day in a lot of markets. But really, it's only an engagement with that content at hand. So again, it can be a white paper, a webcast, a blog, video, etc., whatever you're offering the user. It's that one-time piece of engagement. The band qualification is the additional information or request of information from that user to confirm something from them. And again, it's usually a project within the next 12 months. And so that confirmation usually, not always, but 99% of the time has to come from telemarketing, because it's a direct engagement with the user and a confirmation with that user. And the predictability of that project confirmation, and sometimes the additional question sets at hand that do sometimes come with BANT leads, actually is very difficult to do in online marketing, because you don't always know or understand when that project is happening or if a project is confirmed with that user. So a lot of times BANT is actually engaged with via over the phone. That's really the big difference between the two.
And quick follow-up, in order to get that BANT qualification, budget, authority, need, time frame, you should expect to be paying more per lead than a content syndication lead, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, a BANT qualified lead usually is 3 to 4 times as much as your standard content syndication lead, depending on the qualifications given.
Okay, great. Question number 3. Let's come back to this notion of filters. What are the pros and the cons if I want to apply a firmographic or a demographic filter to a content syndication program?
There actually are pros and cons. I mean, coming from a publisher, we're not a big fan of the multiple filters, but I do encourage them sometimes, because filters actually add good strategic help to eliminate waste and expenses. Something we'll get into in a little bit later is that bad content syndication can cost you money, and that's not a good thing. So we do encourage that you do add filters such as, you don't want to target your competitors or marketers. That's an addition of what we would call an exclusion list added onto the syndication campaign. You want to remove people that you would never engage with, right? Marketers, sales professionals, in some cases, or just, standard filtering. For instance, if you have a very extensive channel extension offering and you're an enterprise marketer, you definitely want to focus on maybe more of an enterprise targeting. Things like that are good ways of adding filtering that can avoid expenses in the future. The cons of filtering sometimes, though, and we have seen this on a lot of cases, people get really carried away with filtering, actually is, you can eliminate active buyers that are researching your project, and you could be alienating people. We find that in IT purchasing a lot of times, and this happens with job function filtering and named account list or ABM targeting, which are good things. In some cases, you want to add that maybe as an additional special target. But as far as filtering is concerned, sometimes if you get too carried away with those type of filters, you could be alienating some of the other people that are actively researching and or looking at your content. And especially in today's market, you want to make sure that you're being aware of where your white space lies, or people necessarily that similar the target that you're going after, but maybe don't meet your named account list or job function filters that your salespeople highlight as, their quality that they want the greatest. So filtering can be very tricky. You definitely want to add some of it to make sure that you're not developing waste, but not add too much filtering so that you're not alienating people who actually want to talk to you and purchase from you.
Okay, 2 quick follow-ups. The first, are there standard filters that I should expect are always applied on content syndication leads?
Yes, I would definitely, always apply, and this is a very standard thing, is you're focusing, especially in the B2B technology market, You probably want to target IT professionals. A lot of people add line of business to that. So that basically eliminates sales and marketing and consultants as a standard practice. Also, you probably normally, unless you're targeting them specially, want to eliminate targeting the channel, because those people are going to be your potential partners, not necessarily going to be purchasing from you. Those are pretty standard filters that we see with all campaigns.
Okay, second follow-up question. Is it fair to say the more and tougher filters that I apply to a campaign, the higher the cost per lead?
That is correct. Usually, standard CPL differentiations can come from the more that you target. So for instance, if you are targeting something that eliminates 90% of your audience, CPLs could double or even triple in some cases, depending on your targeting. So you want to create that balance, and sometimes you can even price yourself out of your targeting.
Okay, let's move on to our next question. How do the partners that I might enlist actually go about generating a lead? Talk to us a little bit about tactics.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to answer this question just by going through, the quality of leads, and this is something we referenced before. There definitely is high quality versus low quality, and then even worst case scenario, what we define as content syndication leads. This comes from a lot of people's list structure and opt-in structure of their lists. So high quality are contextually relevant environments from buyers who have downloaded your content and have opted in to receive the follow-up. So it's usually your publishers that have websites that are targeting those users themselves and are reading that information alongside of your content. So not just libraries that people are marketing to, but relevant publisher content that goes hand in hand with the offerings you're giving. And that opt-in, especially for those of us in the European market space, is very, very important as part of that publisher engagement. There are also low quality leads, and they may have engaged with the opt-in, but they've definitely been sourced from contact lists that have been scraping the web. As a result, they may not have consented to receive your outreach. There are definitely list brokers and information people out there that have good information on users, but they may not have consented to get your content, and therefore, as a quote unquote lead, may or may not have engaged with your content. And this is, a very popular thing right now, is using web information sets to get information on users for sales calling follow-up. But again, that opt-in is very, very important, especially for those who are following GDPR tactics. And additionally, some additional tactics in other regions and countries that are very important to engage with, such as Australia, Japan, are some of the key countries that have additional laws that you make sure you have to engage with. Worst case scenario, depending on the vendor you're working with, like we said, they could be in violation of consent-based regulations. And so, just want to make sure you ask that question. So there's a variety of different ways of engagement for leads. Bad leads overall are wasted leads. So you just want to make sure that the publisher you're working with is giving you quality, and that maybe not necessarily a call list to work through. Serious Decisions estimates that every bad record costs you as much as $100 US per engagement. Because think about it, you actually have to hire the person to, go through the data, make sure the data is good, call into them. HubSpot says you need to call into them 13 plus times in order for them to engage with you. That's a lot of, telemarketing that you're probably paying an outsourcer for. If you're going to actually get prospects and data, and information, you want to make sure that it's good data, and data changes constantly all the time, right? So good publishers are making sure that they're keeping on top of that. And yes, not everyone's perfect, but you do want to make sure that someone who is engaging with their audience on an ongoing basis with relevant content and information, those are the kind of people that you make sure you want to do business with, because they're going to give you the best data. Because if I was wasting $100 per record of bad data, I might as well be paying a little bit more to input good data into my system.
Yep. And I'm imagining it's reasonable to expect that a provider is going to be fully transparent about their tactics around how they generate a lead.
Yes, they should be. In a lot of cases, we have found that there may be things that they're not telling you. And so it's really, really important to ask, important questions before, signing up on where is this data coming from and are they appropriately opted in.
Okay. Before we detail a few more of those questions, let me ask you my final question here in our FAQ series, which is, what's the best way to follow up with a content syndication lead? Because I'd imagine the value of the lead itself has a lot to do with what happens after it's delivered.
It does. And, I put this here because I'm a big believer in the sales versus marketing nurture cadences and building and working them together. I'm also a realist. In some cases, when I say this and spell this out, that maybe 25% of the companies that we work with currently, enterprise, mid-market, small business, can actually execute on this type of strategy. It's very difficult. It's actually pretty expensive. Takes a lot of time and effort, manpower, something that not a lot of people have, especially field marketers who are listening in the audience, and especially field marketers who actually have to translate content and do things in languages other than English. I know that this is a very difficult task. So it is by far the best tools is that you're actually building between a nurture and a sales cadence messaging. And the difference is, just to explain to people who aren't quite sure how to go about this, there's lots more materials on techtarget.com related to this. But, nurture and branding from marketing is a very important aspect that I think that everyone should be doing. And it builds brand, it builds pre-awareness going into your, sales association. It helps with eliminating those people that maybe aren't really into researching 100%. And it actually gives additional engagements for your sales to feel confident about the follow-up and really putting effort into that follow-up. We do find that sometimes sales gives up maybe a little bit early in their calling strategy. And so if you have someone that's engaged with a few pieces of content, or at least engaged with multiple emails, you actually have some push to make sure that you can tell sales that this is an important person. We have to keep trying to get them on the phone to engage them. Sales cadence messaging, I think, is by far the most important. And if you were to do one of two things, and even as a nurturing specialist, I would actually go with the sales cadence messaging. This is a mixture of a rep following up via multiple points of contact with the user. And it does involve phone calls into that user as well. But it also has social media engagement, email marketing engagement. And usually it's about a 10-point process of information, if not more, to try and engage that person. It can be additional offerings. It can be a phone call to see, hey, what's going on with your research? How can I help? Are there any questions that are unanswered? And this is really intended to establish maybe a personal connection in the prospect's journey that is going to take the next upwards of 3 to 6 months to shortlist users to actually start to talk serious. So you do need to have that personal connection and that engagement with them on an ongoing basis. And that's by far the best thing that people and clients, marketers can do as an initial engagement with a content syndication lead.
Great. All right, Byrony, before we let you go, Why don't we talk about ways to vet potential partners in the content syndication space? What are some of the questions that we should be asking them before we make a decision about where we want to park our budgets?
Yeah, the number one thing I will always tell marketers is, obviously I want to do business with me, but I just want to make sure you're asking smart questions, because I don't want you to waste money doing business with other people, because there's nothing worse for a marketer than to waste your money. Because, getting budgets is hard. It's a struggle. I do it all the time. And we just want to make sure you're being smart about where you're spending your money. So there's absolutely questions to be asking anyone that you're about to work with. Number one being, we've talked about this, do you have a direct relationship with that audience? How are you attracting and engaging with them? Do you have examples of content that you leverage to engage them? We haven't talked about it today, but intent-based marketing, which is a whole separate webcast that I know we're getting into for an FAQ, is really, really an important way of understanding how and what that user is doing at that moment. And it actually is a very important example of how publishers are building direct relationships with their audience, and how you can give that information back to the vendor related to how they're engaging with additional content. And that direct relationship is so important in today's marketplace. And it goes hand in hand with the second one, are you collecting an opt-in at user? It's very, very hard to get users, especially, audience level people, to opt in for online marketing engagement. And they really have to want the content that they're engaging with. And so again, going back to number one, that direct relationship with the audience for a publisher is really important, because that's really the number one way that you're getting number two, which is an opted-in audience for consent and following, especially if in Europe, all the GDPR laws that need to be maintained at this time. What approach are you taking to generating leads? Are you using telemarketing? Are you determining who to call from? How are you determining to call from that content offer? That's actually a really good question as well. I'm not against telemarketing for, demand generation. Sometimes works very well. At least it's confirming a phone number, if anything. Obviously, organic and or self-selection leads via, online marketing is by far the best engagement. But if you do have a vendor that you're engaging with for telemarketing, just be sure to ask them, how are they actually generating the lists that they're calling into for telemarketing? Are they doing it on intent-based marketing? Are they doing it based on publisher engagement, additional engagement with topical relevant content? Or are they just calling a scrape list that they purchased just to get people on the phone to say that they downloaded something from you? It's a very important distinction. And the last thing is, what information in the lead report are you sharing? This is actually a very, very important question. I don't think a lot of people ask, because the information and format of the lead report can be really important. I just had a marketer do a partnership with a company. We thought it was going to be a great partnership, and we did not ask this question. And we got 3 points of information back when I was expecting 15 points of information about the user. And, partial identification and information can be not very good if you actually have to then go and spend money to look up those people's country and appropriate phone number and email address and postal address and any other information, industry, employee size. Looking up all of this information from a user can be done, but it's also really expensive and really difficult that you're pulling in the correct information about that user. So you want to make sure that you're asking what information you're going to get back from the publisher before you make that call, because at the end of the day, if 3 points of information, it was pretty much useless to do that activity.
Great. Very comprehensive list there, Byrony. We thank you very much for the information you've provided. We promised this would be quick. We hope it was also very educational for everybody attending. If you want to continue to explore this issue, we invite you to do so at techtarget.com. You see the link there on your screen. And we also ask you please to join us for the other parts of our Digital Skills Acceleration series. On behalf of Byrony Seifert, I'm John Panker. Thanks so much for your time today.